Hello, One Grader. My name is Dan. Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me today. We got a lot to get into today. First, I need to announce that this is a format change of the. This is a format change of the show. What's going to happen now, instead of me breaking up between 2 to 3 streams each night or each day, I am going to go live once, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday at least. I might take a break on Sunday, and it depends on what's going on the weekend. For a Saturday stream would have to be something pretty breaking. I just haven't found an audience on a Saturday stream. But this is fine. We do have a lot to get into, but again, this is going to be a format change. Now it's going to be more of a show that you would expect, one that I try to model off shows that I watch myself, streams on YouTube. It was becoming quite draining to go live maybe every 2 to 3 hours sometimes. I had to cut that because that's going to annoy my subscribers. It's going to annoy the people that are going to see constant updates. And not only that, but as you look at my live streams, you see just how much content is pushed back. And that is something I wanted to avoid immediately after realizing that within 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks, within 3 or 4 days, I pushed back 2 weeks of content. And for people that are just looking at the channel casually, and they haven't been subscribed very long, I don't want people to feel like they have to watch 6 episodes or 6 of this to figure out what's going on. Instead, it's going to be a longer format. Tried it for the first time yesterday, went a little long, but again, we have a lot to get into today, as always. Now, because I'm getting into more of the South Dakota homes and roads in McCook Lake area ravaged by flooding. Homes were destroyed, roads were washed out, sinkholes opened up, a railroad bridge was swept away, and rescuers worked Sunday night into Monday morning to save people from rising floodwaters in the McCook Lake area of southeastern South Dakota. It looks like the Grand Canyon here, and it's just pouring in. What a disaster, said McCook Lake Associate President Dirk Laurie while kayaking the lake and surveying the damage Monday morning. He waded through trash and navigated currents that he said rivaled the Missouri River. The lake is a 273-acre horseshoe-shaped body of water ringed by homes around its northern shore. It's just west of Interstate 29, while the Big Sioux River is just east of the interstate. The Missouri River is a short distance to the south. As of Monday morning, the water on the McCook Lake was rising about 6 inches an hour, already 10 feet above normal levels, Dory estimated. While dozens of homes were flooded near the lake, Several more were under threat as the water continued to rise. The state of South Dakota, North Sioux City, and private contractors built a levee Sunday evening across the interstate at Exit 4 in an effort to tie it in with the other protective structures and reduce impacts to McCook Lake and North Sioux City from the Big Sioux, which is swollen from 3 days of rain last week. Governor Kristi Noem, speaking at a Monday morning press conference in North Sioux City, said the Big Sioux rose higher and faster than authorities anticipated Sunday as they were mobilizing the effort. The river crested at a record 44.98 feet overnight, surpassing its old record from 2014 by 7.28 feet. Noem said the river crest was 2 feet higher and came 17 hours sooner than an earlier forecast. We expected that we had overnight to build a levee, Noem said, adding, and then within an hour that had changed dramatically. We had to build that levee within a few hours. You can see this here, this image. You just see how rapidly between Saturday and Monday the river rose into a major flood stage. These are concerning numbers, especially just the rapid incline of flooding. Did a dam let loose? This is massive. You go from 1,000 feet to dozens of feet. This is flood stage is 32 feet. Yeah, they are well above flood stage. They are in major flood stage. And even after it goes away, there's still so much damage, so much mud just left behind. The South Dakota Department of Transportation closed a portion of Interstate 29 at 6 p.m. Sunday to build the levee. Noem said workers used sandbags as the water rose, but soon switched to truckloads of clay offered by a local resident. Noem said a levee was built in the same location during a 2014 flood, and water never reached it. This time it did, and Noem said the levee did divert water. State and local authorities did not immediately have a count on the number of homes destroyed at McCook Lake. Union County Emergency Management Director Jason Westcott said rescuers conducted 2 sweeps in McCook Lake and would do a third, and he was feeling pretty comfortable that almost everyone is out of the area. Westcott said work was underway Monday morning to open a donation site in North Sioux City, open a shelter for displaced residents, and draft a debris management plan for the cleanup. He encouraged people to check Union County Emergency Management's Facebook page for updated information. We're also asking everyone, this includes residents, to stay out of the flooded areas, Westcott said. A lot of these flooded areas are very dangerous at this time. The flooding resulted from 10 to 15 inches of rain that fell from Thursday to Saturday in the hardest hit area of southeast South Dakota, northwest Iowa, and southwest Minnesota, with totals exceeding 17 inches in some locations. 21 of South Dakota's 66 counties experienced flooding. Whoa. Massive rainfall. Noem said Sunday that at least one person had died as a result of the flooding, but she declined to provide further details on the death. The State Department of Public Safety separately reported that an 87-year-old man died Saturday near Harrisburg when he accidentally backed a utility terrain vehicle over a washed-out road section. The department declined to say whether that was the death Noem was referencing. The heavy rainfall filled rivers and creeks that run south and east to the Missouri River in the southeast corner of the state, putting McCook Lake, North Sioux City, and Dakota Dunes in the crosshairs of the collected floodwater. Authorities issued a voluntary evacuation order for the Dakota Dunes area Sunday. The road in front of Morgan's Spitchinger's McCook Lake home was washed away overnight. Her family's house is flooded. Some of her neighbors' homes are almost entirely submerged and another is split in half. Spitchinger evacuated with her husband, 2 toddlers, and dogs before the water reached their home, alerting neighbors to evacuate as well. There was nobody telling people that water was in our backyards. Within 30 minutes of us seeing the water and leaving, there was water in our basement. Beyond the damage at McCook Lake, Westcott, the local emergency manager said some damage in other areas was prevented. What occurred yesterday was a result of a mitigation effort. Mitigation is designed to lessen the effects of flooding in our area and also lessen the effects on critical infrastructure. If we did not take the mitigation effects that we took yesterday, much of North Sioux City would be underwater. But that diverted water seemed to go straight into McCook Lake and into Spitchinger's backyard, she said. Her house was delisted from the flood zone a few years ago after officials reviewed and updated a flood map, so she doesn't have flood insurance. She's worried that the actions of the governor and other authorities, or a lack thereof, have cost her family their home and they won't find an acceptable replacement. I'm pretty mad at Christie because she makes it sound like they did a great thing, but in reality it hurt a huge part of our community. They said they had this plan set in place since at least the previous flood. I'm angry they saved the dunes and the business district, but not us. Lowry said that his association attempted to have city officials review the diversion plan in 2014, but lamented that they didn't push hard enough and that their concerns fell on deaf ears. Officials should review the plan now, he said. Scott Vitos' lakeside house hasn't flooded yet Monday morning, but his pontoon boat and lift were on the other side of the lake. While the state did build a levee, it wasn't fast enough to help McCook Lake residents, he said. This was intentional. This is basically a triage thing, Vito said. To us, living on the lake, we're not happy about the Let's Flood McCook Lake and Save Sioux City move. Lowry estimates that once the water stops flowing into McCook Lake, the water level will drop about an inch per day. He said it'll take months for the lake's residents to return to normal. Beyond the damage around McCook Lake, Nome said Monday that a BNSF railway bridge on the Big Sioux River had been destroyed by the flooding. Nome encouraged everyone affected by flooding to document their damages and share the information with their insurance provider and local emergency manager. She said that information will help the state prepare its application for aid to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. U.S. Representative Dusty Johnson attended the Monday press briefing and said he and the state's 2 U.S. senators will press hard for federal support. Having seen some of the damage, having a sense of how high these waters are, I would be surprised if there will not be a robust federal assistance when we talk about recovery, Johnson said. Some Missouri River tributaries, including the James and Vermilion rivers, were still rising Monday, with crests not expected until later this week. State geologist Tim Cowman said the varying pace of crests of these rivers should help prevent further damage in McCook Lake, North Sioux City, and Dakota Dunes area. It will take a while for that water to get down here, Cowman said. Our feeling is that the Big Sioux will obviously be past its crest and will have dropped enough that we'll be seeing drops in the Missouri by the time those pulses from the James and Vermilion get here. So I don't anticipate that the Missouri River later in this week will get any higher than it is today, and actually it'll be lower than it is today. No one welcomed those projections but cautioned against complacency. As you can tell clearly, things change quickly. The State Department of Transportation, meanwhile, said the I-29 closure was extended Monday morning between exits 2 and 26. A lengthy detour has been established with maps on South Dakota 511.org. This is massive amounts of rain. And again, just a huge sharp uptick of flooding. Hmm. 389,000 people displaced in southern Brazil. Flooded Brazil ghost town, a climate warning to the world, United Nations advisor says. Sao Paulo, June 25th. Record floods that killed over 170 people and displaced 500,000 in southern Brazil are a warning sign of more disasters to come throughout the Americas because of climate change, an official United Nations Refugee Agency said on Tuesday. Roughly 389,000 people in the state of Rio Grande do Sul remain displaced from their homes because of the intense rain and flooding, which local officials say was the worst disaster in the region's history. Scientists say climate change made the flooding twice as likely to happen. Andrew Harper, a special advisor on climate action in the refugee agency UNHCR, visited a flooded neighborhood in the state capital, Porto Alegre, over the weekend and called it a ghost town. It was underwater for almost 40 days. There wasn't even any rats running around. Everything had died, Harper said in an interview on Tuesday. Even after the floodwaters subsided, residents have not returned to the neighborhood, where streets are piled high with waterlogged garbage and debris. Many are still living in shelters, including Venezuelan refugees had resettled in Porto Alegre. UNHCR is helping the local government to build temporary housing. Residents of some hard-hit areas may never return, having been forced to move by repeated flooding, Harper said. But how many would become so-called climate migrants will only be known years after disaster. The floods surpassed all expectations that local authorities had for climate disasters, and governments need to do more to prepare for these events, Harper said. We're seeing the emergence in Brazil of what may be seen throughout the Americas. So to ignore this, they do it at their own peril, Harper said. Governments need to understand where the people most vulnerable to climate change live, like the neighborhood he visited in Porto Alegre, and include those people in the climate plans, he said. It's a warming signal, but we've been seeing warning signals for 5-10 years, Harper added. At what point do you basically have to slap somebody in the face and say, wake up, you're not going to ignore this? This is by Reuters. Jake Spring. 389,000 people displaced. What do? That is a massive number. do you do? Where do you go? Absolutely unreal. 389,000 people displaced. It is an unreal number. A rare blue-eyed cicada was found in Niles, but thousands more could exist, Professor says. Blue-eyed cicada was found by Carol Will McDonald of Niles in early June. She said she found the critter near her home, near the area of Milwaukee Avenue and Oakton Street. Carol Will McDonald didn't think she'd find a blue-eyed cicada when she went looking for one in her front yard in Niles, Illinois. It was a 1 in a million shot, she understood, to find one amidst its red-eyed brethren. In a sea of cicadas that have taken over the northern suburbs was the signature singing and clumsy flying. It was pretty cool. I mean, he did stand out from the others. McDonald recalled thinking when she first saw it. After taking a picture of the statistically anomaly, she shared what she saw on social media and reached out to a field museum to see if they were interested in the sighting. According to Paul Willazian, distinguished professor of biology at Oakton College, finding a blue-eyed cicada is indeed a rare occasion. He said that sightings are known colloquially as 1 in a million. Colloquially as 1 in a million, but studies have found that cicadas with blue eyes are 1 in a quarter million. That they look like blueberries. They look like blueberries for eyes. Wild. Especially wild is they look like blueberries. That's a cicada with blue eyes. Especially this picture here with the cicadas. One's like a little bit of orange, you got red in the back. Blue, that is just ridiculous looking. People eat these. I guess people eat everything. Anything and everything. This from PBS. Ruidoso wildfire. 20 people missing. 29 people missing. Sorry. Ruidoso residents begin returning as teams search for 29 people missing after wildfire. As residents return to a fire-ravaged village in the mountains of southern New Mexico, the mayor of Monday warned them that some parts of Ruidoso remain off-limits as special search and rescue teams comb the charred rubble along the hardest-hit streets. They're looking for the remains of people who are still unaccounted for after the South Fork and Salt fires ripped through the area just days ago, killing at least 2 people, forcing thousands to flee and destroying more than 1,500 structures. Mayor Lynn Crawford put the number of missing at 29. Village officials said in a Sunday night update that the search teams have identified potential additional fatalities, but any confirmation will have to be made by investigators. The search and rescue teams are in there and they're with canines, and so they're still going to property to property to property, Crawford said during his Monday morning radio address. With cell service going down during the evacuations last week, it made communication nearly impossible. While service slowly is being restored, some residents said Monday they are still having difficult time connecting. 29 people in the list have not been in touch with friends or family since last Monday. The list was larger just a day ago, but village officials have been using social media and working with the American Red Cross to mark evacuees as safe as soon as they are heard from. Authorities have blocked traffic into so-called exclusion zones to ensure these areas remain undisturbed until they are officially cleared. The FBI also is investigating offering up to $10,000 for information leading to the arrest and convictions of those responsible for human-caused fires. The flames were first reported June 17th. Within hours, the fires moved through tender dry parts of the Sacramento Mountains from Mescalero Rio, Apache tribal land towards Ruidoso. Evacuation orders included thousands of homes, businesses in the Ruidoso Downs horse track, prompting traffic jams as people dropped everything and fled. Village officials estimate that several hundred homes were among the structures destroyed or damaged. Assessments continued Monday as some residents were allowed to return. Images shared on social media showed some homes reduced to ash, only their foundations or fireplaces left standing. Charred vehicles and twisted metal roofs were lying on hillsides where homes were once stood. Some properties were saved, although the ponderosa pines that once surrounded them had blackened trunks and their needles were singed. The village set up temporary housing for about 500 people and food, and other supplies were being distributed. Officials were encouraging residents who returned Monday to bring bottled water and a week's worth of food, as some utilities have yet to be restored. Several dozen members of the New Mexico Army and Air National Guard were stationed in Ruidoso to help. Utility workers were also installing new power poles and stringing wires throughout the community. Workers with the New Mexico Environmental Department were testing the drinking water system. President Joe Biden issued a disaster declaration for parts of southern New Mexico last Thursday, bringing up funding and resources to help with housing and other emergency work related to the fires. The two fires have burned about 40 square miles, or 104 square kilometers. Monday brought another day of light rain and higher humidity levels, aiding firefighters as they bolstered lines around the perimeter. Full containment isn't expected until July 15th, according to fire officials. July 15th, it is June 25th as of this stream. Full containment isn't expected until July 15th. That's unreal. Officials also warned residents to be mindful of the potential for flash flooding if more rain falls on the bare mountain slopes, because the ground is scorched. No permeation of water into the ground table. It's blocked. Officials also, Carrie Gladden, a spokeswoman for the village of Ruidoso, noted that wildfires are nothing new to the Sacramento mountains, but she called this a whole other level of devastation. It kind of takes your breath away when you see it, she told the Associated Press. And you know, we are resilient and we will rebuild and we will absolutely come back from this. But boy, it's hard to see it at this point. Plus 29 people missing. This is another tragic wildfire that will be remembered. South Fork and Salt Fire. This is from The Guardian. Jiang. Migration of 6 million antelope in South Sudan dwarfs previous records for world's biggest aerial study, reveals. The movement is more than double of East Africa's renowned Great Migration and has continued despite decades of war and instability. Also wildfire, because there is plenty of wildfires still raging in South Sudan near the wetlands, inside the wetlands, around the wetlands. An extensive aerial survey in South Sudan has revealed an enormous migration of 6 million antelope, the largest migration of land mammals anywhere on Earth. It is more than double the size of the celebrated annual Great Migration between Tanzania and Kenya, which involves about 2 million wildebeest, zebra, and gazelle. Migration in South Sudan blows any other migration we know out of the water, said David Simpson, Wildlife NGO African Park Manager for Boma and Bundingilo National Parks, which the migration moves between and around. The estimates indicate the vast herds of antelope species are almost 3 times larger than East Africa's Great Migration. The scale is truly awe-inspiring. The animals across the region have endured despite decades of civil war and instability in South Sudan. In 2007, a Wildlife Conservation Society survey suggested South Sudan's migration involved about 1.3 million animals, but African Parks, which manages Boma and Bandingilo, national parks in the southeast of South Sudan on behalf of the government has been able to provide a more accurate count using improved technology and assessing a more comprehensive area. 2 planes were kitted out with cameras programmed to take a photo every 2 seconds. This produced 330,000 images, which were studied by University of Juba graduates using software to count the wildlife. Seeing these animals here at such scale is something I could have never fathomed still existed on this planet, said Mike Fay, African Parks Landscape Coordinator for Boma and Bandingilo. From the air, it felt like I was watching what Earth might have been like a millennia ago, when nature and humans still existed together in balance. South Sudan President Salva Kiir Mayardit said that the account made the country's migration #1 in the world, adding that, as South Sudan continues to develop, we are committed to transforming the wildlife sector into a sustainable tourism industry. From April 28th to May 15th, 2023, the pilots and observers flew over an area of 122,774 square kilometers, almost the size of Greece, taking in the entire known range of the antelope species in the Boma Bandingilo Jonglei landscape. They covered some areas that had never been surveyed, as well as antelope. The surveyors documented other species including lions, giraffes, buffalo, and elephants. The most difficult challenge is setting up the aerial survey equipment on the plane so the field of view is correct and the calibration is precise and accurate, they said. It's extremely dangerous flying low level with big birds like vultures in the air around the plane, and it's intense flying for 4 hours and counting continuously every day for weeks. The estimate indicated 5 million white-eared kob, just under 300,000 tying, 350,000 Mangala gazelle, and 160,000 bohor reed buck, 4 species of antelope totaling just under 6 million. They said the figure means that this Great Nile migration of antelope is the largest on Earth, according to our data, dwarfing any other known land mammal migration on the planet. The Great Nile migration is a year-round movement of animals from the southwest to the northeast, passing into Gambela in Ethiopia and back again, Ethiopia to the east of South Sudan. It is probably driven by the availability of good grazing conditions. As part of the study, 126 animals across 12 species were collared to measure the distances they traveled. 11 collared cobs, the most numerous antelope in the landscape, were tracked covering approximately 2,000 kilometers or 1,250 miles each. South Sudan isn't the longest land mammal migration on Earth. The caribou migration in Alaska, at 3,200 kilometers or 2,000 miles, is longer, but it is a similar distance to the Great Migration between Tanzania and Kenya, which includes the renowned Mara River crossing. If you watch Wild Earth, you know all about the Mara River crossing. They've covered it extensively so many times, so many different crossings, different locations. Continue. Sorry, I digress. While South Sudan's is the most numerous large mammal migration, its numbers are dwarfed by Zambia's annual bat migration, in which 10 million straw-colored fruit bats fly from West Africa to Kansanka National Park. The study's findings are a game-changer for conservation efforts in South Sudan, Simpson said, and could become one of the greatest conservation opportunities on the planet. South Sudan is considered safe for international tourism, but such a vast wildlife spectacle means the potential for tourism is immense, says Simpson. Having the world's largest land mammal migration could put South Sudan on the map as a must-visit ecotourism destination. But the migration's current critical value is food scarcity for local communities. The Boma Dingilo Jonglei landscape is home to numerous people, many of whom live off the land, as well as revealing the scale of wildlife in the landscape. The survey revealed threats to the migratory animals and the human communities that rely on them. Simpson said, including the expansion of roads, agricultural charcoal production, commercialization. These activities lead to habitat loss, resource depletion, and disruption of migration routes, ultimately threatening the survival of the migration and the livelihoods of local people, he said. By ensuring the health of the ecosystems the migration depends on, the livelihoods of people across the migration landscape can be secured. This is very wild. Took images constantly using software to count. 6 million antelope. That's what they look like. Beautiful. Got those rectangular eyes. Horns. Straight out of their skull. Not antlers. Abe Lincoln wax replica melts in brutal DC heat. That just kind of fell back all the way. You see the feet melting towards the ground, the chair is melting, everything is melting. Who thought it was wise to put a huge wax figure in a heat wave? Why? Let's find out. A wax statue of President Abraham Lincoln failed to keep its head as temperatures soared to triple digits over the weekend in the nation's capital. The legs followed soon, leaving the torso and turning into blobs. The chair sank into the ground. The head from the 6-foot wax replica of the Lincoln Memorial is now under repair, leaving behind a wire sticking out of the 16th president's neck. The memorial rests on the site of Camp Barker in Washington, D.C., a Civil War-era refugee camp that housed formerly enslaved and freed African Americans, now home to an elementary school. Wow, still around. It was placed outside of a Garrison Elementary School as part of the Wax Monument series by Virginia-based artist Sandy Williams IV. Replica is more than just a wax statue. It is also a candle, and this is not the first time it had issues with melting. The statue was installed at the same location last September, but the first version of the wax monument included over 100 wicks that were prematurely lit, melting a significant portion of the art installation ahead of its dedication ceremony. The new version, installed in February, has strategically placed in fewer wicks. A plaque below reads, "Please blow out your wick within 1 to 2 minutes." The installation is a direct commentary on DC's history of Civil War-era contraband camps, according to this website. The replica, commissioned by nonprofit Cultural DC, is the third installation of Williams' 40 Acres Archives, the Wax Monument series, which includes wax replicas of popular public monuments and cultural symbols. The DC metro area was under a heat alert over the weekend. High temperatures are expected to continue throughout the week. The wax head is set to be reattached this week, local media outlets reported. It's a giant candle. That's interesting. Not just made out of wax, but it's a giant candle. A giant candle. Multiple wicks. Let's see how much it weighs. It says 6-foot wax replica, but it's gotta be heavy. At least 1,301 people died during the Hajj, Saudi Arabia. At least 1,301 people died during Hajj, Saudi Arabia says, mostly unauthorized pilgrims who walked long distances in intense heat. This year's pilgrimage took place during a heat wave, with temperatures at times exceeding 50 degrees Celsius or 120 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 3/4 of those who died did not have official permits to be there and walked under direct sunlight without adequate shelter, the official Saudi news agency SPA said. Some of those who died were elderly or chronically ill, the agency added. Hajj is the annual pilgrimage made by Muslims to the holy city of Mecca. All Muslims who are financially and physically able must complete the pilgrimage at least once in their lifetime. About 1.8 million people took part this year, Saudi Arabia said. Health Minister Fahd al-Jalajal said efforts had been made to raise awareness about the dangers of heat stress and how pilgrims could mitigate this. Health facilities treated nearly 500,000 pilgrims, including more than 140,000 who did not have a permit, he said, and some were still in the hospital for heat exhaustion. May Allah forgive and have mercy on the deceased. Our heartfelt condolences go to their families, he said. Saudi Arabia has been criticized for not doing more to make the Hajj safer, especially for unregistered pilgrims who have no access to facilities such as air-conditioned tents and official Hajj transport. Temperatures in Mecca climbed as high as 51.8 C, according to Saudi Arabia's National Meteorological Center. Countries across the world have been giving updates on the number of their citizens who died, but Saudi Arabia had not commented publicly on the deaths or provided an official toll until Sunday. AFP news agency quoted an Arab diplomat as saying 658 Egyptians had died. Indonesia said more than 200 of its nationals lost their lives, while India gave a death toll of 98 people. Pakistan, Malaysia, Jordan, Iran, Senegal, Sudan, and Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region has also confirmed deaths. Fallout from the number of deaths, particularly involving unauthorized pilgrims, has been growing. On Saturday, Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Mabouli stripped 16 tourism companies of their licenses and referred their managers to prosecutors for enabling illegal pilgrimages to Mecca. On Friday, Jordan said it had detained several travel agents who facilitated the unofficial travel of Muslim pilgrims to Mecca. Meanwhile, Tunisian President Kais Saied fired the Minister of Religious Affairs. Hajj permits are allocated countries on a quota system and distributed to individuals by lottery. However, the costs involved prompt many to try to take part without a permit, although they risk arrest and deportation if caught. Before the Hajj, Saudi authorities said they had removed hundreds of thousands of unauthorized pilgrims from Mecca. 1,000 I'm sorry, I forgot to. There, at least I changed the headline. I'm getting better at doing the headline thing. Now, what would be really advanced is to change my live headline every time I change an article. That would be just so much work for nothing. Why would I do that? The Rapidan Dam, Minnesota. It is currently clogged up with debris, and water is finding another route through the earthen dam on the other side of the dam, the channels. Water is everywhere. The Rapidan Dam in Blue Earth County, Minnesota fails on June 24th, 2024 due to intense flooding. Breach that led to erosion, that led to further wider breach, leading to the destruction of a bridge and hydroelectric power components. Although, please keep in mind, this dam was built over 100 years ago. People should be evacuated now while they still have a chance to take their belongings, be able to go through stuff before the dam fails. It's not a question as if the dam will fail. It has to fail. It already did fail. Partially, there's still so tremendous amounts of water coming out of it. This is more on that rail bridge that collapsed, a severing tie between South Dakota and Iowa. This is much longer than I wanted. But this is more in that railroad bridge that collapsed during flooding in the Midwestern United States that has forced water rescues, led to evacuation, caused at least one death, and brought additional misery during a vast and stubborn heat wave. Bridge connecting North Sioux City, South Dakota with Sioux City, Iowa collapsed into the Big Sioux River late Sunday. This is that bridge that we were looking at, or we were reading about in the other article. Wait a minute, did I skipping ahead? I know. Yep, that's the dam. As far as here, let's find out.
received an update just this morning on the Rapidan Dam in the Mankato area, and we're told it's still possible this dam could collapse because those raging waters, the debris as well. Authorities say that flooding will not destroy Mankato if it does.
Yeah, Kelsey Christensen joins us live there with the very latest on this. Just got an update from officials today, Kelsey.
Yeah, they say that national inspectors are on the way here this afternoon. I have a lot of updates to get to, but first I want to bring you video of Chopper 5 where you can see more erosion happening today as
And here is where the dam actually is flowing out of, with lots and lots and lots of debris that's clogging up the actual dam itself. So water is rising and finding a way out through the earthen dam. Right here. This bridge got destroyed. The erosion is going to destroy this house.
that rushing water is forced to the west side of the dam,
West side
right
of the
where
dam.
an old family home sits, but it is still hanging on at this hour. Now, in a new update, the Blue Earth County Emergency Management Director says a national inspection deemed the dam satisfactory just last month. So the issue here is all that debris clogging the dam, which crews were not able to remove. Now, at this hour, officials say there's still concern about the dam breaching. We know that flows have peaked, though, yesterday, they say. We asked what would happen if the dam breaks. Officials say it would not be as bad as many think, according to calculations in their emergency action plan.
In the ballpark of 2 miles downstream of the dam, it'd be approximately a 2-foot rise in tailwater or downstream water elevation. By the time you get...
Okay. He's saying how much the water will rise, but when dams let out water, it lets out a huge chunk of water that turns into a wall of water. You have this tremendous wave that's first that is approaching everybody. It isn't just a steady rise of water. It's an immediate rise of water because the water is coming out of the dam. After it breaks, all of it will just be out.
To Mankato, you're down 10 miles downriver of the dam. It's in the neighborhood of 0.2 to 0.3 of a foot. So 3 to 4 inches.
Now, as for the next steps, right now, officials say everything is in the assessment and evaluation stage. And we also know that Xcel Energy has returned power to the 600 customers that were dealing with outages until about an hour ago. Leah, Paul.
So that hydroelectric power utility was powering 600 homes.
There are no current evacuation orders from the city of Mankato.
Early Monday morning, Blue Earth County officials became concerned about the integrity of the Rapidan Dam on the Blue Earth River. Due to last week's rain, the dam accumulated a great amount of water, which has been pushing over and around it.
This water is moving very fast. It's moving at faster than 40,000 cubic feet per second, which is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 miles per hour. And there is a lot of debris in the water.
Mankato city officials are keeping a close eye on the situation. Already, several roads and parks have been closed in anticipation of which areas would flood first if the dam breaks. These areas include Land of Memories Park, North Sibley Park, Warren Street, and Highway 169 north of Mankato. For this reason, the city is advising residents to avoid these closures for their own safety.
We're really asking people to heed the closures that are in place around the river. The parks that are closed, we need people to stay out of there. It's dangerous. They're closed for a reason, and really, right now, one of the more concerning things on my mind is the potential for a rescue if somebody were to get caught up in the river.
But while this is a terrifying situation, the city says there is no reason to panic yet, because as of now, no evacuations have been ordered.
People I know are certainly concerned about an amount of water that is coming from that dam location. However, so far the river levels haven't been significantly impacted.
In the end, regardless of what happens with the dam, the city is determined to be decisive instead of reactionary. And they say there's reason to hope, because even if the dam fails, it will have done so slowly instead of all at once, which will allow the city to do what's necessary to keep us safe.
We're working with the Corps of Engineers and the National Weather Service on working on some models so that we can have a little bit better idea of what might actually happen. And it's not a catastrophic all-in-one failure. It's slowly failing. So I think that's a good situation to be in.
In Mankato, Sophia Jernander, KEYC.
Imagine that is the latest. Massive. Huge flooding. This dam is all channels open. It's clogged up, full of debris. And it's heading around, cascading down the side and severely impacting the river. There's so much water built up back there that if it crosses over to the side, it meets with the river and bend on that western side, it will be catastrophic. We're looking at a lot of catastrophic, like, they can say all they want about the dam, but this bridge right here is in jeopardy. The amount of force that will pull back on that bridge might collapse it. There's already one bridge lost in this area. They're not able to get the debris out because the water is raging so much. And would you want to stand on it? Not like you can really have a boat like sailing like and just pulling it off by the dam with some kind of tool. How would you even get to do that? Look how that water is raging. Massive. A lot of debris is constantly building up because it's taking in the water crest here, taking in like trees, all kinds of stuff, sticks, branches, any kind of debris actually. And it's getting stuck. It's causing water to go out the west side of the dam. This is in Minnesota, the Rapidan Dam in central south Minnesota.
The Rapidan Dam, still standing tonight, it was able to hold off floodwater and debris from the Blue Earth River. But as the dam stands, the water flowing around it continues to erode the ground. Today, crews are monitoring the situation, and they say the river has now peaked. Water levels appear to be dropping.
However, officials say they are still concerned about damage to the dam and the nearby. Wolf has
Some good news today. Most of the power in the area has been restored, and river levels have dropped just slightly. But the Blue Earth River is still moving very fast and is too dangerous for any of the crews to try and intervene and try and save this dam currently. But more of their focus right now has been on the erosion on the west bank. You see that the house is still up there holding on for dear life as the water is rushing beneath it. That sandstone that you see over there on the west bank has been eroding all day and causing a real concern for the county engineers. This dam is over 100 years old and has seen critical pieces of its infrastructure repaired 4 different times. It was severely damaged in the 2019 floods. The county engineer says that it hasn't produced hydroelectricity since then. The National Inventory of Dams rated the Rapidan Dam in poor condition last year.
This is the second largest flood ever. The previous flood in 1965 completely overtopped and inundated the dam as well. It didn't breach west abutment because there wasn't a big accumulation. With that being said, This is the result of debris that came down the river overnight, coupled with extremely high flows.
Right now, engineers say that if the dam did collapse, it would only raise the river 2 feet in the area, and they are confident in the levee system.
It's a 2-foot wall of water though coming at you.
Cities. Federal regulators and the Army Corps of Engineers are on site right now assessing the damage at the dam. I did talk to some engineers about proposals that have been tossed around really since 2020 as they are trying to navigate the future of this dam. I'll explain more tonight on Breaking the News at 6:30.
Very interesting. It's still holding. Still holding, but it doesn't look good. And that bridge is at risk next to it and behind it. That bridge south of the dam. Let's see. Now in for our headline article. Before I get into the Norfolk Southern train derailment and chemical nuclear explosion. Like, how do you even just describe what they've done here? But this is a big deal. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be reminded. People are still suffering. People are still dealing with the aftermath of this detonation. Nuclear. We got chemically nuked. Put it lightly. By vinyl chloride. And these train cars that they were afraid would explode all at once. So they... Oh, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. But it's, people are still dealing with this. And again, I think I mentioned this before on stream, that it's not just people in Ohio that suffered. That was insane. You can see it here. Insane pillar of smoke. Absolutely unreal. And that has to come down somewhere. Comes down to Pennsylvania, comes down to West Virginia. Not just in the immediate area that was affected by this explosion, detonation of rail cars that had this chemical vinyl chloride in it. There's a lot that is to talk about regarding the derailment and detonation of these rail cars. But before I get into the intentional detonation and chemical nuke of a town, I want to express gratitude with my Patreon, as my YouTube account had its ads account indefinitely suspended due to shocking content. I'm no longer eligible for anything that regards to like the ads account that would be beneficial for I guess it's just the ads. So I don't think the super chats are tied with it and all that. So we'll see it when we cross that line. But instead of capitalizing on advertising and whatever the ads account would have done for me, I created a Patreon account, One Great Earth, patreon.com/OneGreatEarth. The link is in the description of this video. I also have a free membership and a $5 membership as well. I would appreciate it greatly if you would click just even the free membership, just so I can get a better idea of the community that I'm kind of building up here. I have almost 6,500 subscribers. Then 6,500 and teetering on it. But I digress. If you are watching here, appreciate it greatly. Even if you are watching here on replay, to click like and subscribe on the stream and channel. Appreciate it greatly. Also, I have not thought of any exclusive content yet for Patreon, but that is to come as this channel grows and I mold it into something that is watchable. Again, that's my Patreon. That is in the description of this video. One Great Earth. Burn off toxics in Ohio derailment was unnecessary. The National Transportation Safety Board investigators say. Federal agency releases final report on fiery train wreck that alarmed East Palestine and launched a national debate on rail safety. By Justin McDaniel, Washington Post. Norfolk Southern's decision to release and burn toxic chemicals from 5 derailed train cars last year in East Palestine, Ohio, was not necessary and stemmed from a misinterpretation of the risk by the railway and its contractors. National Transportation Safety Board investigators said Tuesday at the board's final meeting of the derailment. The agency's findings offer the most authoritative timeline yet on the decisions that caused a giant toxic plume to rise above the Ohio town in early 2023.
This news story was written by Justine McDaniel. Burn-off of toxic derailment was unnecessary. Say. Federal agency releases final report on fiery train wreck that alarmed East Palestine and launched a national debate on rail safety. Norfolk Southern's decision to release and burn toxic chemicals from 5 derailed train cars last year in East Palestine, Ohio, was not necessary and stemmed from a misinterpretation of the risk by the railway and its contractors, National Transportation Safety Board investigators said Tuesday at the board's final meeting on the derailment. The agency's findings offer the most authoritative timeline yet on the decisions that caused a giant toxic plume to rise above the Ohio town in early 2023, alarming residents and triggering a national debate about rail safety and the government's response. After a fire following the derailment heated up 5 tank cars, the railway and its contractors, concerned that one of the cars could explode, disregarded the fact that the car's temperature began dropping, which should have signaled that the danger was waning. NTSB investigator Paul L. Stansel said. They also failed to provide the local fire chief and other officials with a key report from the chemicals manufacturer, who had inspected the train cars and determined that the probability of the worst-case scenario was low, investigators found. In addition, investigators found that firefighters and emergency responders stayed at the fiery derailment scene longer than they should have immediately after the crash because Norfolk Southern didn't share information about what hazardous materials were on the train until an hour after firefighters arrived. This resulted in greater exposure of emergency responders and to the public to post-derailment hazards, said NTSB investigator Troy Lloyd. The board's meeting Tuesday, held in East Palestine, examined aspects of the crash, the emergency response, and the actions of Norfolk Southern. After hearing from investigators, board members will vote Tuesday on their final findings and recommendations, including the probable cause of the derailment. The NTSB's full final report will follow several weeks later. The board members met with residents Monday and will hold another meeting Tuesday evening. The Feb. 2023 derailment roiled East Palestine, a town near the Pennsylvania border of roughly 4,600 people, drawing national attention to freight railroad safety and leaving residents with lingering fears of contamination. A year and a half later, cleanup by the Environmental Protection Agency is ongoing. One of many ways the derailment's effects are still being felt. The disaster has already prompted industry changes and legislative and regulatory efforts. On Monday, the Department of Transportation announced a new requirement that railroads provide local emergency agencies with information about all hazardous materials being carried through their areas. The NTSB's recommendations will likely spur more changes in how railroads and other carriers can prevent and respond to chemical releases. Former NTSB Chair Robert L. Sumwalt said he expected the NTSB to make an array of recommendations aiming to improve rail safety when it comes to transporting hazardous materials. This derailment will be another one of these watershed accidents that really will change the way that the industry does business, said Sumwalt, the executive director of the Boeing Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. As the NTSB found in its preliminary report, the derailment was likely caused when a bearing on the left front wheel of the 23rd train car failed, investigators said. After overheating, the high temperatures twisted the part and it fell off, allowing the car to drop to the ground. The crew wasn't notified the first time the bearing's high temperature was detected by a trackside device, investigators said, because the alert, categorized as non-critical, went to back-office personnel. The device likely measured the temperature lower than it really was. Investigators laid out several other factors that contributed to the derailment and its effects, including the use of a type of tank car that was easily punctured to carry flammable butyl acrylate, which started the initial fire. That type of car is being phased out for such use and won't be eligible to carry butyl acrylate after May 2029, investigators said. Its failure likely led to the fire, and the fire caused the concern about whether the cars carrying vinyl chloride were heating up. The events that eventually led to the vent and burn could have been avoided had there been no .111 tank cars carrying combustible and flammable liquids on this train, Stansel said. The emergency responders struggled to get information about what hazardous materials were in the train cars, also affected the response, investigators said. When one called Norfolk Southern to ask for the information, known as the train consist, the person who answered said she would call them back and never did. Meanwhile, diamond-shaped placards on the train cars that show what they're carrying burned in the fire, making them illegible. The first responders had so little information that a volunteer firefighter who was a chemistry teacher was the one trying to evaluate some of the hazards, said Jennifer Homendy, chair of the NTSB. The deputy chief was asking for what was on that train for quite some time, Homendy said. Norfolk Southern showed up on the scene without that information. They were asked for that information repeatedly after they showed up. The investigators suggested the NTSB members make recommendations to address the factors that caused the derailment and fire and led to the vent and burn, along with other factors that influenced what unfolded, from Ohio's volunteer firefighter training standards to regulatory definitions. Much of the NTSB's investigation has centered around the decision by Norfolk Southern contractors and officials to release vinyl chloride, an odorless carcinogenic chemical, from the 5 train cars. On Tuesday, investigators provided new details about the decision, saying the railway and its contractors exhibited confirmation bias in assessing the likelihood of whether the vinyl chloride was undergoing polymerization and could cause the train car to explode. At a Senate hearing in March, Homendy testified that the burn-off could have been avoided and that the decision had been based on flawed information. Norfolk Southern has defended the vent and burn decision as an attempt to protect the community from potential disaster and has said they received conflicting information from the vinyl chloride manufacturer, Oxy Vinyls. Ahead of Tuesday's meeting, Norfolk Southern announced it would lead an industry working group to examine the vent and burn practice. It also released a report summarizing the company's steps to increase safety, including new equipment, a system for communicating what trains are carrying to first responders, and a reported reduction in accidents and employee injuries. The company has also pledged millions for community and environmental initiatives in East Palestine. It will pay millions in lawsuit settlements with the federal government and residents. There is no finish line when it comes to improving safety, Norfolk Southern Chief Safety Officer John Flepp said in a statement Monday. We will continue looking for improvements in all that we do. The train derailed on the night of Feb. 3, 2023, after the bearing overheated and the crew couldn't stop the train in time. 38 cars went off the tracks, including 11 that held hazardous materials, and a fire ignited. The temperature of one tank car containing vinyl chloride continued rising after the crash, making workers fear it could burst. On Feb 6, with residents evacuated, officials gave the go-ahead to release the vinyl chloride from the 5 tank cars and burn it, saying they wanted to avert a potential major explosion. In the days that followed, residents of East Palestine questioned how badly that decision may have contaminated the area. Making national news, the derailment became a political flashpoint, with residents, some of whom reported health symptoms, demanding answers and commentators rushing to politicize the situation. In March, Halmandy told the Senate that instead of doing the controlled burn, the tank cars could have been allowed to cool down. She said the Norfolk Southern employed contractors lacked the scientific knowledge to assess the situation and gave incomplete information to the officials who had only 13 minutes to decide whether to give the go-ahead, including Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, Republican. The governor told the Post that officials were not aware they had any other options to prevent a possible explosion, since the EPA and state regulators have said testing doesn't show hazardous chemical levels in the drinking water, air, and soil. But the potential impact has remained a matter of debate as watchdogs and residents have pushed for more studies of the contamination and people's exposure to it. Last week, researchers found that the toxic chemicals released in the burn spread over 16 states, reaching as far as South Carolina and New England. One of the study's authors said the levels of contamination were not toxic, but pretty unusual at a lot of places. In addition to the hazardous materials reporting requirement announced by the Biden administration Monday, the disaster led to a new federal rule requiring at least 2 people to operate long freight trains. It has also prompted the railroad industry to institute some new safety measures, including expanding use of an app through which railroads can report what hazardous materials they're carrying. The Association of American Railroads said the industry had already used the NTSB's preliminary findings to drive meaningful actions that address what happened and examine bearings, wayside detectors, tank car standards, and other areas. Even so, the industry has used its lobbying muscle to block efforts in Congress to pass stricter safety standards, as the Post has reported. Last month, Norfolk Southern agreed to a $310 million settlement with the federal government, requiring the railroad to pay for the Environmental Protection Agency's cleanup efforts and penalties for alleged violations of the Clean Water Act. That agreement includes facilitating the industry vent and burn work group, Norfolk Southern said Friday. The railroad also reached a $600 million settlement in April to resolve class action claims made by residents and businesses. Norfolk Southern's other steps include paying for the area's water monitoring for the next 10 years, implementing a waterways remediation plan, and providing a $25 million medical and mental health services program. Staff writers Ian Duncan, Liz Goodwin, Maxine Joselo, and Kasha Patel contributed to this report.
Norfolk Southern botched calls to blow open vinyl chloride tanks After Ohio train derailment, the National Transportation Safety Board reports Norfolk, East Palestine, Ohio. Norfolk Southern and its contractors botched the decision to blow open 5 vinyl chloride tanks after last year's disastrous derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, and trackside detectors that might have prevented the crash failed to accurately detect the temperature of a burning wheel bearing 20 miles beforehand, according to the National Transportation Safety Board. Area residents, rail industry representatives, and local and state officials packed East Palestine's high school auditorium Tuesday to hear the NTSB's investigation findings and recommendations to prevent similar disasters. On behalf of the entire agency, I want to recognize the significant impact this derailment has had, NTSB Chair Jennifer Amandy said in the beginning of the hearing. She added that while some have tried to minimize the wide-reaching effects of the crash because there were no deaths, the absence of fatality or injury doesn't mean the presence of safety. Dozens of train cars derailed February 3rd, 2023 on the outskirts of East Palestine near the Pennsylvania border, including 11 carrying hazardous materials. Some residents were evacuated that night, but then days later had to leave their homes amid fears of imminent explosion. Despite potential health effects, officials intentionally released and burned toxic vinyl chloride from 5 rail cars 3 days after the crash, sending flames and smoke into the air. The NTSB has said early on that an overheated bearing on one of its rail cars that was not caught in time by trackside sensors had likely caused the crash. Investigative hearings have since then also highlighted other possible contributions, including widespread rail job cuts and rushed inspections. Investigators also delved into why officials chose to deliberately blow open the vinyl chloride cars and burn what is a key ingredient for making PVC pipes. After confirming on Tuesday the trackside detector failure, NTSB investigators also said that Norfolk Southern and its contractors compromised the integrity of the vent and burn decision by withholding accurate information from Oxyvinyls, the company that made the vinyl chloride. They added that Norfolk Southern contractors repeatedly recommend blowing open the tank cars and burning the contents despite evidence that the tank cars were cooling after the crash. Norfolk Southern and its contractors continued to assert the necessity of a vent and burn, even though available evidence should have led them to reevaluate their initial conclusion, investigator Paul Stansel said. The railroad defended the decision again Tuesday and said it was based on more than just temperature readings. Officials had also concerns about the way the pressure relief devices malfunctioned on the tank cars. Plus, Norfolk Southern said nothing kept Oxyvinyls from joining the discussion in the command center and sharing its opinion that the tank cars wouldn't explode. Earlier this year, Amandy told Congress that the agency's investigation had determined that the controversial operation that prompted evacuations wasn't necessary. Oxyvinyls experts testified at earlier NTSB hearings they were a certain feared chemical reaction that could have caused those tanks to explode wasn't happening. But Ohio's governor, its first responders, and the hazardous material experts who made that decision have said the information they had that day made them believe an explosion was likely imminent, making the burn the best option despite the risk of unleashing cancer-causing dioxins in the area. Oxyvinyls has declined to comment publicly beyond what its experts testified to test last spring, and the company didn't immediately respond Tuesday. NTSB staff said Tuesday that no federal standards currently exist for how railroads should respond to bearing failure alarms, and they recommended that the Federal Railroad Administration establish rules governing railroad responses to such alarms. They also recommended that new guidance be developed for deciding when first responders use the vent and burn tactic that was deployed last year and that federal standards should be developed for trackside detectors. At this time of the East Palestine derailment, only one person in Atlanta was monitoring alerts from all the detectors across Norfolk Southern and doing so from home. That person didn't see the Salem alert about the elevated temperature of the bearing, but under the railroad's rules, no action would have been taken because there was only one elevated reading. Hamidi said the analyst that night said he did not get formal lunch or bathroom breaks, but numerous times would run to get his lunch and quickly return to monitoring. She said that's certainly not a way to run a railroad. Norfolk Southern has since put 2 people on duty and is trying for free, NTSB investigators said. The company also announced last week that it will lead an industry-wide examination of how to improve the vent and burn decisions are made in future derailments. That was part of its settlement with the federal government. Though NTSB recommendations are binding, Congress may be willing to enforce some of them because of the crash's spotlight on rail safety. More than a year ago, a bipartisan group of lawmakers led by Ohio's 2 senators proposed a package of reforms, including requiring 2-person crews and setting standards for the inspections and detectors that help prevent derailments. The bill ultimately stalls in the U.S. Senate under resistance from Republicans and railroads. House leaders have said they didn't want to consider new rail safety regulations until after the final NTSB report was released. With limited success, federal regulators also pushed for the railroads to make changes like signing on to an anonymous government hotline to report safety concerns. The industry responded to the crash by promising to install more trackside detectors, review the way they are used, and help first responders improve their handling of derailments with more training and better access to information about the cargo. Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw pledged to make things right in East Palestine with more than $100 million in aid to residents in the community. Shaw also hired a consultant from the nuclear power industry to recommend changes and tried to work with labor. Still, critics said Norfolk Southern was too often satisfied in the past with only doing the minimum required for safety, and workers reported no big changes in day-to-day operations. After the derailment, all the major freight railroads pledged work to improve safety by adding hundreds more trackside sensors to help spot problems like overheating bearings, and by re-evaluating how they analyze data from those detectors. The Association of American Railroads trade group said the industry will review the NTSB report and look for additional ways to improve safety. But so far, the industry's efforts haven't resulted in a significant boost in safety records in the FRA statistics. The NTSB has also looked at the struggles of first responders who didn't immediately know exactly what was on the train after 38 cars jumped off the tracks, many spilling their contents and catching fire. Investigators said Tuesday that firefighters didn't learn what was on the train for roughly an hour and didn't order an evacuation or tell their firefighters to pull back to a safe distance until about 2 hours after the derailment. But Norfolk Southern put a lot of people's lives in jeopardy immediately and their health going forward. They didn't have to do this, but they did it anyway, and what is the punishment going to be? Paltry fine? Federal officials finalized a new rule Monday that will require railroads to inform first responders about what is on the train immediately after a derailment. The industry says more than 2 million first responders now have immediate access to that information via an AskRail app that allows them to look up any train's cargo. This isn't okay. People are reporting higher reports of cancer, men with breast cancer, people with rare cancer. Now, after this explosion over a year ago, cancer causing chemicals seep into the soil, pool up in areas, be lapped up by dogs and cats, eventually return to a rain cycle to put it in the air. This doesn't go away just because you ignite it. You put it in the atmosphere. Where is our carbon budget? Our atmospheric carbon budget? Where was it then? Before the detonation of the rail cars. It's terrible. These people are still suffering and struggling with health problems that are all related due to the vinyl chloride that was let loose and burned. Not all of it was burned. A lot of it pooled up in areas, and it just wound up all over the place. I have way too many authority running investigations saying that they did not need to blow up these rail cars. The people in this town, people in the east in Pennsylvania, and in the southeast, West Virginia, didn't have to sacrifice their health as a result of this decision. If Ohio politicians were told that this was an immediate decision that needed to be made, but not weighing the risks of what was inside the containers or the tankers. Like, so many people should be held liable for this failure. But the only people that will suffer are the poor people that can't afford to jump on any kind of class action lawsuit or just sue in general. As far as I know, I haven't heard any actual lawsuits going out, just fines that Norfolk Southern is paying out. They can say that they're putting out $100 million, but that's nothing. They should be bled dry. That's how this should work. When you screw up so badly that you put thousands of people's lives in jeopardy and their health, cause risks such as all kinds of cancer in the people that returned after the giant explosion, after the burning of the vinyl chloride. It doesn't just go away. It's not being incinerated. It was being burned. It was being vented and burned. Didn't work. And instead of going with what we know is to be true now, that these rail cars weren't in any significant danger of exploding, Norfolk Southern should be paying everything. Healthcare, most definitely healthcare. Because the people that live here that now have to be scanned and treated for cancers, too many. And it's expensive. It's something that Norfolk Southern should be willingly supplying people with healthcare of this region because of their deliberate sabotage of their health. How else can you put it? Like, they knew what they were doing. They knew what was in the rail cars. And instead of waiting with the results that these weren't in any danger of explosions, they were allowed to vent the rail cars and burn it, causing huge plumes of toxic poisons to be in the air, in the atmosphere. This has far-reaching more far-reaching than originally estimated, because not everything just keeps going up. Comes up and to a point, comes back down. You see this front that just, people just got washed with this stuff and didn't even know it. Especially people in Pennsylvania. What are they going to do now? People are still suffering. The land is still contaminated. It's horribly contaminated everywhere. And it's not okay. To readily have independent investigations that have largely been solid in regards to what happened here. The fault falls directly on Norfolk Southern and their decisions to detonate and chemically nuke a small town. And they want to walk away from it. They don't care. They don't care. They don't have to care. So the longer this goes, the worse it will look for them, right? No? Probably not. Nobody cares. The only people that seem to care are the people that are in East Palestine. People that are in Pennsylvania east of it that also had huge fallouts of the chemical coming down on top of them after being vented and ignited. But it was the company that manufactured the vinyl chloride even, do they even corroborate with, like, okay, how can we detonate this stuff? How can we burn it? How we vent and burn it? Did they know that it was a temperature they had to reach to be able to burn it? Be able to make it vaporize? I don't think they cared. Doesn't seem like they cared. They wanted to get this over as soon as possible, and as soon as they detonated it, that was it. And they scooped out huge parts of soil around the rail immediately. No independent entity that's testing the ground that they took, that they illegally and very quickly dumped all around the place. Contaminated soil from the East Palestine disaster. The soil is taken to different places. That'll be something for another day to get into, is where the dirt from East Palestine went. That was news for a minute. People, it took Biden a year to visit East Palestine after the derailment and disaster. These people, can't imagine how they feel. People that live here, people that used to call this place home after they had been chemically nuked by a railroad company. And the more evidence that keeps coming out is on the contrary to everything that they were saying. They wanted to blow it up. They wanted to control burn the chemical instead. Did they know what they would have to do to be able to vaporize it, to ignite it, catch it on fire? Was it possible to catch it on fire? Vinyl chloride, can it be set on fire? These are questions that I don't think they asked the manufacturer. I don't think they asked anyone. I don't think they felt they had the answer to anyone. Even during the conferences, they still never seem to care. How can you be so obtuse about life and health of people that you bombed? It's not okay, and it's not right. And this is not going away because the vinyl chloride still exists in great quantities in East Palestine. Status Quo News does a lot of great work when it comes to East Palestine. I think the only people that are still reporting on it, still reporting on the people there, the health problems they're having. It's like Norfolk Southern just wants these people to die, and that's it. They don't care. You have to make them care. How can you make an entity such as this care? It's not people that you're fighting. You might as well be a whistleblower for coming forward about this stuff. That's how they would treat you. Scum. Worse. Even though that you're the one suffering, you and your family are suffering greatly as a result of this detonation of the rail cars with vinyl chloride. It can't be said more about how dangerous this stuff really is and how it still doesn't make sense for the detonation. They were so afraid and alarmed of what the rail cars exploding, but with the evidence on the contrary saying that the rail cars were not, they were actually cooling down. What do? They still detonated the rail cars. They are completely at fault for everything in this area. For the cancer rates that spike, East Palestine and Eastern Pennsylvania, as far as the air carries this horrific compound. It's not okay. And they're going to walk away from it while people suffer. This just shows you this could happen to anybody, anywhere, at any time. I live near rail, some really long rail trains, and they have derailed before. There's a lot of chemical holding tanks on the rail, as well as a lot of different vehicles inside the cars, inside the train cars. What do you do if half that rail derailed, and instead of trying to write it up or stand it up, you just blow it up? It doesn't seem like they tried any other option. Then they had to do a cleanup, which just took all the soil samples. But it doesn't matter because it's everywhere already. It's come down like rain after so much being vaporized in that huge plume. Not right. What do we expect? Is this every city, every state with rail that this could happen? Such horrible, horrible decisions being made in spite of on the contrary of evidence that's stating that they're not in danger of exploding. The only danger of exploding them would be when you explode them, when you blow them up yourself. They're cooling down. There's no need to blow them up. They're not going to explode in one giant explosion. It makes me fear for generations to come that it's expensive enough to buy a house, and you buy a house, and then a railroad company chemically nukes your entire city, your entire village. It might only be 4,500 people, and people here aren't rich. They still call this place home, and it's not like they can just pack up and leave. Their house is worthless now. What are they going to do with their property? It's worthless. Norfolk Southern rendered the land inhospitable to life because it affects all mammals, all carbon life forms. Can't touch it, be around it, breathe it in. You can't inhale it. You shouldn't anyway. But they were putting that stuff in the air in such huge, vast quantities and a plume of it that everybody was touched a little bit by it, contaminated. There's no stopping it from where it came down all over the place. Even though they had this nice vertical plume going out because they were venting it and burning it. Again, they were not in contact with the manufacturer of the vinyl chloride. So they weren't burning it at the correct temperatures to vaporize it, in my opinion. That's something I haven't heard talked about yet, is that they're, besides just in that article mentioned that they were burning it. They weren't saying at what temperature and how they knew what temperature in a controlled setting to properly do this at. The manufacturer has not been in contact, so they were just doing this at the seat of their pants. Because what? They have the power and the decision, the authority, so they don't have to answer to anyone else. They do what they think is immediate, not right. A lot of people are suffering as a result of this. And it might not be anytime soon that people see any kind of relief, because it's everywhere. Everywhere. This poisons everything. Water table, it poisons the ground, trees, plants, animals, drink from puddles like dogs. This eliminates life locally from the area. Start seeing less squirrels, start seeing less wild animals as a result of them just living outdoors during this time with a plume. Botched call, put it lightly, after chemically nuking a small village. But since the people are poor, it doesn't matter. You can do what you want, because they don't have the authority or the power to fight you. It's not right. But just because it's not right doesn't mean that the right thing is going to be done. These people are on their own. Even though that Biden visited 1 year after, there's been just these investigations saying that Norfolk Southern screwed up real bad. Okay. Now what? And what? These people lost everything. Their property, their homes, their land, contaminated, soaked, vinyl chloride. Because it comes down everywhere. It came down everywhere. It wasn't just a plume that went up. It had to come someplace, come down someplace, and it would be in the air, directly in the air, coming down, droplets, vaporizing it to the point you eventually start seeing the plume tilt. As far as I recall, there was no tilt. Just kept going up, higher and higher, never ending. days is this? There's nothing scientific.
Sam Jericho's skin hasn't been the same since February of last year.
I've been to the doctors. I've had biopsies, punch biopsies done. They come back chemical dermatitis. Paid big money for different creams and lotions, and they don't work. And the medication they want to give me, the steroids, I'm diabetic, so I can't stay on them. They raise my sugar, which causes more issues. So I'm kind of scarred for life.
The 59-year-old lives just over 1 mile from the site where a Norfolk Southern train carrying toxic chemicals derailed and caught fire last year. Sam first met reporters with the Associated Press while she was evacuating her home on February 6th.
Run.
Minutes before officials blew open 5 tank cars containing vinyl chloride because they worried they might explode. The sound of trains has long been a staple of life in East Palestine.
It was like a bird chirping because I was so used to them.
Palestine.
But
I kept
now-
saying Palestine, Palestine.
Now it's a reminder of the accident that spilled a cocktail of hazardous chemicals in the town. Officials say the contaminated soil and water have since been removed.
We know that contamination did not reach groundwater. We know that the drinking water is saved.
And Norfolk Southern is still in town, restoring the site of the derailment.
We want the village to get back to where it was before and really trying to keep whatever impacts we have really as small as can be.
But resident Misty Allison says she still sees those impacts today on her 2-year-old daughter Audrey and 8-year-old son Blake.
We live very close to the school, so on nice days I'll walk to pick him up. And I remember once he jumped in a puddle and he stopped and looked at me and said, "Is vinyl chloride in this puddle?"
It's a term that wouldn't be in his vocabulary if not for the derailment.
Hopefully in 10 years from now, even though this is part of our story, that big plume isn't what everybody sees. This is my husband's hometown. He's a 4th generation East Palestine resident. And we lived all over Boston and Michigan and Cleveland. And we chose to live here.
Patrick Orsagis, Associated Press, in East Palestine, Ohio.
Norfolk Southern withheld information about the toxic chemicals present when one of its trains derailed last year in East Palestine, Ohio. That's one of the conclusions. In a new report from the National Transportation Safety Board, which found that local officials lacked key information before deciding to vent those chemicals into the air. Now, as you know, News Nation has been on this story since the very beginning, and we're following the latest as the NTSB presents its findings to the community in East Palestine. In fact, here with us now is Christina Seislov. Christina lives near East Palestine. She's been monitoring the air, the water there since the derailment, and we thank you for coming on News Nation. Once again, reaction to what we're hearing in this long-awaited report, at least so far.
Well, I think that for a lot of us that have been involved with the activism in the community, it wasn't really a surprise to us that the vent and burn was not needed. Another reaction is to the recommendations for training and such with the fire departments. And I think that that's something that needs to be done across the whole country, not just around here. But so far, that's what I've taken away from this.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to put up on the screen here because I have it in a tablet in front of me. We can project this, the chemicals found in East Palestine during the derailment right now. And you see, you know, whether it's vinyl chloride, linked to brain, lung, and blood cancers. You see down the list here, toxic by injection, another chemical that causes burning irritation to the skin and eyes, shortness of breath, another one that causes dizziness and drowsiness. And then the final thing here in the map, we have all the states
that are impacted by this. Now, this is not just East Palestine, Ohio. What a wide area across the Midwest, all the way to the Northeast. And that's what we're talking about here after the derailment. And as you said, this burn wasn't even necessary. What would you say? Right. I think I know what you would say about Norfolk Southern, but what about the NTSB and the way they've handled this? Is that an agency that at least has been a little bit better and is trying to prevent something like this from happening in the future, at least?
I think that the NTSB has been probably the most transparent governmental agency that we've dealt with. They listen to us whenever they come in. They've asked for our input on things. They have another community meeting later on tonight for us to ask questions. And Jennifer Homendy, the chair, she's been very good at calling out things that most people won't call out.
Yeah, what do you think will come up, Christina, tonight at that meeting? What are the questions that are still out there from the community?
I have questions about training on the fire department side of things. Since I used to be a first responder, I think that that's been a thing that's been a problem for a long time. I think that another thing that will come out is why did 5 cars need to be burned when they didn't need to be burned to begin with?
Right. We'll watch for the details of that meeting. We always thank you for coming up. Thanks so much for watching.
What? Allegedly ignored by the yardmaster, who told him this is what they want. The hearing also focused on the toxic fumes ingested by residents and first responders.
I'm concerned about not only my responders, but everybody around for long-term health concerns. Hopefully we don't find anything. Unfortunately, we probably will have some that will.
Terrible. I thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely and keeps me motivated in putting out climate-related videos like this on YouTube. That is some heavy news. Okay. We don't want to end on such a horror story, you know, but I had some good things in this video. This wasn't just all, you know, fire and hell. There's some really good feel-good moments about 6 million antelope migrating. Massive. If you don't watch Wild Earth on YouTube, definitely catch it out. It is a wildlife show, safari show, where they have the camera in the car and you're in the safari pretty much. They talk to you, they talk to the camera, and really opened my eyes on a lot about conservation and what it really takes, why zoos maybe being a step towards conservation, but it would require people buying more land to turn into a conservation reality than it would be then the land being just tore up, grabbed, mined, burned. This East Palestine chemical nuke situation, you know, isn't going away anytime soon, and this new investigation that it says that they didn't have to do this at all for any reason. They were just mad with what? They weren't talking to anybody. They were just telling everybody just immediate things. But they knew that they didn't have to do this. They did it anyway. Why? Why? Did they really believe this was on the verge of explosion? It could happen anywhere. And the fallout would be the same. These things, there needs to be change. Especially first responders, firefighters, county workers, people that are in the area immediately. Especially everyone that had any kind of contact with the rail cars while they were setting them up to be detonated. Those people are at great risk. So it's not just the people that live in East Palestine, but it's also the first responders and the people that were there on the site, on that day, on that week. People that had to just watch this unfold. And they don't care. They don't have to care. How do you make something as big as this care? It has to be discovery, it's federal findings. And rail yards, cars, they don't get fined relative to what they should be doing for blocking traffic for an hour, stuff like that. Almost nothing. This could happen anywhere again. You can find the video of the rail car on fire, but there is video of the rail car being recorded to have been on fire for the derailment. This becomes worst case scenario because their worst case scenario wasn't true, wasn't coming to a head. The rail cars weren't going to explode. They blew them up anyway. Why? There are sins of our fathers and our grandfathers that we must deal with when it comes to climate change, in the hands that people we've known have had a hand in changing climate for a variety of reasons. Don't want to get into them. This isn't just climate change. This is people suffering, people needlessly suffering through a change or probability of the worst case scenario was low. That right there is pretty damning. The car's temperature began dropping, which showed us a signal that the danger was waning. And then what? I don't know. People are in for a long journey. They might move out, but they're still going to be taking a piece of East Palestine away from them. With them. They'll always be with them. Always that concern of cancer and other diseases as a result of being contaminated completely with this chemical. All right. I've been streaming for a couple of hours. I am going to call the stream here for Tuesday's show, 25th of June, 2024. Again, this is a new format I'm trying out, so I'll go live at 5:30 p.m. Eastern with an amount of material that leads one into the other like this, or talking about things like, dam is failing and when and if it failed, do I go live again reporting, because I wasn't really thinking of being like breaking news, the dam failed, more looking back at reports of climate change that cause climate change and what's currently, like detonating rail cars full of cancerous chemical has climate change written on it. You're putting that into the atmosphere, this particle, this aerosolization, this chemical that changes the air. And they didn't care. They still don't care. How do you get justice out of this? How do you get environmental justice out of this? I don't think we can. It just seemed very unapologetic. The CEO and the rest of Norfolk Southern just want to get away from this as quickly as possible. They don't care. You can't make them care. You have to make them pay for justice. There's people that surround this area, businesses that are lost, and pets that have died as a result of the contamination. Hearing about that one child that jumped in a puddle and froze up, wondering if it was a puddle of vinyl chloride, heartbreaking. Children should not be worried about a contaminated future. They shouldn't have to worry that every puddle they fear it. That's the world we live in now. If I were to talk that way when I was a young kid, I don't know what people would have thought. But these days where exploitation, especially when you have exploitation of poor neighborhoods, as a result that it's easier to detonate it and blow it up and let the locals try to deal with it, the aftermath, fallout of being chemically nuked East Palestine. Can't say that enough. Or that this won't happen again. Because we're not talking about the rail cars just derailing. We're talking about the decision that went into detonating these rail cars full of vinyl chloride. Benton still doesn't make sense. All right. Thank you again. Please take care.